In the West, a new kind of killer appeared, armed not by strength, but by a metallic cartridge revolver that could be reloaded in seconds, not minutes. Suddenly, anyone could become deadly, and some cowards became more dangerous than the legends they feared. The guns that decided the fate of the frontier didn't just win gunfights. They decided who survived, who ruled, and who never stood a chance. But what tipped the balance of power overnight? Metallic cartridges changed everything on the frontier. Before their arrival, reloading a revolver meant fumbling with loose powder, lead balls, and percussion caps. Each chamber was loaded one at a time, every step a chance for error. A gunfight could turn deadly while a man struggled to ram powder and cap into a cylinder, often taking several minutes to get a weapon ready again. Then came the breakthrough, a brass cartridge that was self-contained and weatherproof, and it dropped straight into the chamber. With a flick of the wrist and a quick ejection, 6 shots could be reloaded in seconds. The Smith & Wesson Model No. 2 Army, first sold in 1861, brought this speed to the Union side during the Civil War. By 1871, more than 77,000 had been produced, making it a common sight in the hands of frontiersmen. When Rollin White's patent expired in 1869, Colt and other manufacturers rushed to produce their own cartridge revolvers. The Colt single-action Army, chambered in .45 long Colt, and introduced in 1873, quickly became the standard. Suddenly, the difference between life and death was not about who was stronger or faster. It was about who could keep their gun loaded and ready. In a world where a reload could be the last thing a man ever did, the metallic cartridge meant survival could hinge on just a few seconds. A loaded revolver in the wrong hands changed the rules on every frontier street. With cartridges, violence no longer waited for a careful plan or a fair fight. Arguments in saloons, card games gone sour, even a glare across the boardwalk, these moments could explode into gunfire in an instant. The old image of 2 men meeting at high noon faded fast. Most killings were not duels, but sudden impulsive acts. A man who might never have dared to draw first with a slow-loading pistol could now empty his cylinder before anyone had time to react. In Dodge City and Tombstone, the number of shootings tied to petty disputes or drunken rages grew, and the line between bravery and recklessness blurred. Homicide ledgers from Kansas cattle towns in the 1870s and the 1880s show per capita murder rates that would shock any modern city. Dodge City's numbers soared as high as 165 per 100,000 adults per year. Lawmen faced a new kind of danger. Their badge and gun were supposed to keep order, but now every encounter could turn lethal in seconds. Officers were gunned down trying to break up fights or enforce town ordinances. The revolver did not just make men deadly, it made cowards dangerous, and forced even the bravest peace officer to rethink what it meant to stand between chaos and order. Subscribe if you want the truth behind the legends, not just the myths. On the grassy ridges above the Little Bighorn River, the sound of gunfire was deafening. Custer and his men, numbering just over 600, carried the standard Springfield Model 1873 carbine, a single-shot rifle that was slow to reload under pressure. Across the ravine, Lakota and Cheyenne warriors gripped Henry and Winchester repeaters, some with magazines holding 16 rounds, each fired as quickly as a lever could be worked. Archaeologists later found hundreds of .44 rimfire cartridges scattered on what survivors called Henry Hill, silent proof of the volume of fire pouring back at the cavalry. The difference was more than just numbers. The 7th Cavalry could manage 2 or 3 aimed shots per minute, but a warrior with a lever-action repeater could send 10, even 12, rounds downrange before a trooper could reload once. The battle turned chaotic fast. Troopers trained for open field charges and volley fire found themselves pinned behind sagebrush, their rifles jamming as copper cases expanded in the summer heat. Ammunition belts ran low. Some men tried to clear jammed Springfields with pocket knives, while bullets zipped overhead. Warriors fired in rapid succession, closing the distance with each volley. Oral histories from Lakota descendants describe a wall of lead, forcing the soldiers back from every high point. Custer's last stand was not a heroic charge. It was a desperate retreat, cut down by a firepower gap no amount of training could bridge. The evidence left in the dirt, rimfire casings, shattered carbines, and spent revolvers tells the story. At Little Bighorn, technology decided who lived and who died. On that day, a handful of repeaters in native hands reversed every expectation about numbers, discipline, and military might. The West was being decided not by courage or tactics, but by the speed at which a man could fire and reload. By the early 1880s, the great buffalo herds that once thundered across the plains had nearly vanished. What began as subsistence hunting had turned into industrial slaughter, driven by demand for hides and bones in eastern markets. Long-range Sharps rifles, accurate out to 1,000 yards, let hunters drop dozens of animals in a single day. Freight wagons hauled mountains of hides, sometimes 2,000 at a time, eastward, while bones littered the prairie for years. William Buffalo Bill Cody signed contracts to supply meat to railroad workers, killing over 4,000 buffalo himself. But Cody was only one man in a vast commercial machine. By 1883, fewer than 1,000 buffalo remained from herds, once numbering in the tens of millions. For Plains tribes, the collapse of the buffalo was a death sentence. Their entire way of life, food, shelter, tools, and culture relied on the herds. As rifles stripped the land bare, starvation and forced settlement on reservations followed. The rifle, once a tool for hunting, became a weapon of cultural destruction, severing the bond between native nations and the land they had stewarded for centuries. When resistance flared again in 1890, the U.S. Army arrived at Wounded Knee Creek with a new kind of firepower. Hotchkiss mountain guns, breech-loading artillery capable of firing explosive shells and canister shot, were trained on the Lakota camp. In less than an hour, at least 150 men, women, and children were killed, and some estimates put the number closer to 300. The rapid mechanical fire of the Hotchkiss guns crushed the last organized native resistance on the plains. The rifle had ended the hunt. The cannon ended the fight. Stagecoaches crossing the West carried more than passengers and gold. They carried a warning. Perched beside the driver, a Wells Fargo messenger gripped a double-barreled shotgun, a 10-gauge loaded with buckshot. At close range, the coach gun delivered a spread wide enough to stop a charging horse or scatter a gang before they ever reached the strongbox. The message was clear: a frontal assault meant suicide. Robbery attempts that began with a direct approach often ended with bodies in the dust, the coach rolling on. Outlaws learned to fear the messenger's position, where a single pull of each trigger could unleash a wall of lead. Stage routes across Arizona, California, and the Dakota Territory became battlegrounds where the defender's edge was measured in seconds and inches. The coach gun didn't just protect cargo, it shifted power to those willing to stand their ground, forcing would-be robbers to reconsider their odds and look for new ways to strike. Bandits abandoned head-on attacks as soon as shotguns guarded the stagecoach. Instead, they mapped routes, waiting for blind corners and weak points. In 1878, the Canyon Springs robbery in Wyoming showed the new playbook. Robbers struck the stage station, ambushed the staff, and waited for the armored coach. Guards fired back, but the thieves vanished with gold, leaving bodies behind. As messengers armed themselves, outlaws turned to dynamite, blasting open safes from a distance. The Sontag brothers and Chris Evans, robbing trains in California in the 1890s, used explosives to avoid direct gunfights, forcing open express cars and safes while guards watched from cover. Law enforcement lagged behind. Towns with weak laws or slow responses became easy targets. From the 1850s to the 1900s, over 450 stagecoach robberies were recorded. Arizona alone saw more than 120. The lesson was brutal. Every new weapon forced a workaround, and the law was always a step behind. Firearms still decide who holds power and who stands aside. Today, the debate over gun access shapes laws, lives, and headlines across America. The legacy of those weapons endures, not as relics, but as living questions. Who gets a chance, and who never will? Share your perspective below.